Imagine turning kitchen waste into a lush, vibrant garden. Welcome to the world of composting. This enchanting process takes what you might consider rubbish and transforms it into a rich, nourishing soil conditioner. Picture your discarded vegetable peels, coffee grounds, and lawn clippings. Now imagine these scraps, not in a landfill but fueling the growth of blooming flowers, verdant vegetables, and towering trees. That's the transformative power of composting. Today, you will learn to create your own garden gold. Composting is nature's way of recycling. It's a simple yet impactful process that transforms organic waste into a nutrient-rich soil conditioner. But how does this transformation occur? At its core, composting is a biological process. Microorganisms such as bacteria and fungi break down organic matter into simpler substances. This process is aided by larger creatures like earthworms and insects. The result, a dark, crumbly substance that gardeners lovingly refer to as black gold. The benefits of composting extend beyond enriching our gardens. By composting, we reduce the amount of organic waste that ends up in landfills where it releases methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Instead, we convert it into something that nourishes the soil, promoting plant health and growth. Composting also improves soil structure, helping it retain water and resist erosion. Now let's visualize the process. Imagine a compost bin or pile. We start by layering green materials such as vegetable scraps, coffee grounds or fresh grass clippings, and brown materials like dried leaves, straw or shredded paper. These provide the nitrogen and carbon that microorganisms need to thrive. The compost pile heats up as these microorganisms get to work, breaking down the materials. Turning the compost pile occasionally helps maintain this heat and speed up the decomposition process. Over time, the original materials become unrecognizable, transforming into a rich, earthy compost. So, what does this mean for your garden? Compost acts as a soil conditioner, enriching the soil with nutrients and enhancing its ability to hold water. This leads to healthier, more vibrant plants. It's like giving your garden a gourmet meal. But composting isn't just for those with green thumbs. Even if you don't garden, compost can benefit houseplants or lawns. Plus, it's a great way to reduce your environmental footprint. By composting, you're taking a significant step towards sustainable living. Now that we understand composting, let's delve into why we should do it. Why compost? Because it's a game changer for your garden and the environment. Composting is like turning lead into gold, but instead of a mythical process, it's a natural and scientific cycle that turns your kitchen scraps and yard waste into a treasure trove of nutrients for your garden. You see, when organic waste like fruits, vegetables, and leaves decompose, they create humus, a dark, rich, crumbly substance that's chock full of nutrients. This humus not only improves the structure of your soil, making it more fertile and productive, but it also helps retain moisture, which means you'll need to water your plants less often. But the benefits of composting go beyond your garden's borders. It's a simple act with far-reaching implications for our planet. It's estimated that about 1/3 of all the waste we generate could be composted instead of ending up in landfills. When organic waste rots in a landfill, it produces methane, a greenhouse gas that's over 20 times more potent than carbon dioxide in terms of its heat-trapping capacity. By composting, we significantly reduce the amount of waste we send to the landfill and consequently reduce methane emissions. Plus, by creating our own nutrient-rich compost, we reduce our dependence on chemical fertilizers, which often have damaging effects on the environment. Imagine, through composting, we can achieve a twofold victory. Decreasing the waste we generate while enhancing the productivity of our gardens. It's a win-win for us and Mother Nature. But here's the cherry on top. Composting is a process that happens naturally, without the need for any special equipment or chemicals. It's a process that's been happening for millions of years, long before humans walked the earth. By composting, we're simply harnessing this natural process, helping nature do what it does best, while reaping the benefits for ourselves and our gardens. Now that we know why composting is important, let's get started on how to do it. Setting up your compost bin is the first step towards creating garden gold. The first decision you'll need to make is choosing the perfect compost bin. There's a variety of options available, from rotating tumbler bins to stationary bins and even worm composters. Consider your space, the amount of waste you generate, and your personal preferences. Some like the convenience of a tumbler, while others enjoy the hands-on nature of a traditional compost heap. Once you've selected your bin, next comes the placement. Location is key. You'll want to choose a spot that's convenient for you, but also suitable for the composting process. An ideal spot would be a place that's easily accessible from your kitchen, yet tucked away from high-traffic areas. The compost bin needs to be placed directly on the ground, not on concrete or asphalt. This allows beneficial organisms from the soil to migrate up into your compost, helping to break down the waste. It's also important for the compost bin to have good drainage to prevent it from becoming waterlogged. Ensure your compost bin is situated in a partially shaded area, as too much direct sunlight can dry out your compost, while too much shade can keep it overly damp. A balance of sun and shade will keep your compost healthy and productive. Next, you'll want to layer your compost. Start with a layer of browns. These are carbon-rich materials like leaves, straw, or shredded paper. Browns are the dry elements of your compost. On top of this, add a layer of greens. These are nitrogen-rich materials such as fruit and vegetable peelings, coffee grounds, or grass clippings. Greens are the wet elements of your compost. Alternate these layers and remember to keep your compost bin covered to retain moisture and heat, both essential for the composting process. And there you have it. Your compost bin is set up and ready to start turning waste into garden gold. Now that your bin is set up, let's learn about what goes into it. Opening. Not all waste is compostable. Just as every ingredient matters in a well-cooked meal, so does every item you put in your compost bin. But unlike your kitchen pantry, where almost anything goes, the compost bin isn't quite as forgiving. So, let's break it down. Firstly, let's talk about compostable materials. These are your green and brown waste. Green waste includes fruit and vegetable scraps, coffee grounds, tea bags, fresh grass clippings, and plant trimmings. They're high in nitrogen and help kickstart the composting process. Brown waste, on the other hand, is rich in carbon. It includes dry leaves, twigs, cardboard, paper, and even eggshells. These materials help give your compost structure and balance out the moisture from green waste. Now you might be wondering, what about meat, dairy, and cooked food? Well, those are a no-go. They can attract pests and create unpleasant odors. Other non-compostable materials include plastic, metal, glass, and any chemically treated wood or paper. These items don't break down and can introduce harmful substances into your compost. But here's a pro tip. Balance is key. A healthy compost bin needs a good mix of green and brown waste. Think of it like a seesaw. Too much of one can throw the whole thing out of balance. Aim for a ratio of about 3 parts brown to 1 part green. This balance helps the microorganisms in your compost do their job effectively, turning your waste into nutrient-rich compost. And remember, size matters too. Smaller pieces decompose faster. So, give your waste a good chop before adding it to the compost bin. Finally, a word on patience. Composting is nature's way of recycling. It's not an instant process. It takes time for your waste to transform into garden gold, but the wait is well worth it. Closing. Understanding what goes into your compost bin is crucial. Now let's look at the composting process. The composting process is a fascinating journey of transformation. It all begins with the collection of organic material, a mix of green and brown matter. Green ingredients are typically fresh, like vegetable peelings, coffee grounds, or fresh grass clippings, providing the nitrogen needed for composting. The brown materials, on the other hand, are dried, things like fallen leaves, straw, or shredded paper, and they supply the carbon. Once you've gathered your materials, start layering them in your compost bin. Begin with a layer of browns, follow with a layer of greens, and repeat this pattern. Each layer should be around 6 inches deep. Water is also an essential part of the process. The compost pile should be as damp as a wrung-out sponge. If it's too dry, decomposition slows down. If it's too wet, it can become smelly. As the pile grows, the magic of decomposition begins. Microorganisms break down the organic matter, turning it into nutrient-rich humus. This process generates heat, which further speeds up the decomposition. Turning the compost pile every few weeks helps aerate it, providing oxygen to the microorganisms and speeding up the decomposition process. After a few weeks to a few months, depending on conditions, the composting process concludes with the harvesting of compost. What was once waste is now a rich, dark, crumbly material, perfect for enriching your garden soil. The composting process is simple yet effective. Now, let's move on to some tips for successful composting. Successful composting requires a bit of know-how. And that's precisely why we're here, sharing the secrets to a flourishing compost pile. Firstly, remember the golden rule of composting. It's all about balance. Strive for a good mix of green and brown materials. Green materials are rich in nitrogen and include things like vegetable peels, coffee grounds, and fresh grass clippings. Brown materials, on the other hand, are rich in carbon. Think of dried leaves, straw, and paper. A good rule of thumb is to aim for a ratio of 3 parts brown to 1 part green. Now let's talk about size. Chop or shred your compost materials. The smaller the pieces, the quicker they break down. So next time you're adding those kitchen scraps or garden waste, take a moment to cut them into smaller pieces. Water is also an essential component of the composting process. Your compost pile should be as damp as a wrung-out sponge. If it's too dry, the composting process slows down. If it's too wet, it may start to smell. So keep an eye on the moisture level, especially during hot or rainy weather. Don't forget to turn your compost pile regularly. This simple act of stirring helps speed up the composting process by aerating the pile and distributing moisture evenly. Temperature is another crucial factor in composting. A hot compost pile will decompose materials faster. So if your compost pile is not heating up, it may need more green materials. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, things can go awry. If your compost pile has a bad smell, it could be due to too much green material or not enough air. Add some brown materials and turn the pile to fix this. Lastly, patience is key. Composting is a natural process and it takes time. Don't rush it. Give your compost pile the time it needs to transform your waste into nutrient-rich compost. With these tips, you're well on your way to creating garden gold. But how do you use it? Your garden gold is ready. Now what, you may be asking? Well, your compost has been working hard and it's time to reap the rewards. Harvesting compost is as simple as reaching into your compost bin and scooping out the rich, crumbly material that's been transformed from your kitchen and garden waste. You'll know it's ready when it looks like dark, fertile soil and gives off a pleasant, earthy smell. Using your compost is where the magic really happens. You can sprinkle it around plants as a nutritious mulch, mix it into garden soil to improve its structure and fertility, or use it as a potting mix for new seedlings. The compost will slowly release nutrients into the soil, promoting healthy plant growth and improving the overall vitality of your garden. Remember, composting is not just about waste reduction, it's about transforming something ordinary into something extraordinary. Turn your waste into garden gold today. Start your composting journey now.